At 1:43 p.m. on August 7, 1942, Lieutenant Commander James "Pug" Southerland rolled his Grumman F4 Wildcat into a steep banking turn 14,000 feet above the Solomon Islands. Temperature at altitude was minus 12 degrees Celsius. His oxygen mask pressed against his face. The engine vibrated through the control stick. He could taste metal in his mouth. 29 years old. Fighter pilot. 217 carrier landings. 0 air-to-air kills. 10 to go. The invasion of Guadalcanal and Tulagi had been underway since dawn. American Marines were fighting ashore on both islands. Navy ships crowded the waters off the beaches, unloading supplies, providing fire support. Now Japanese aircraft from Rabaul were inbound, bombers escorted by Zeros, racing south to hit the invasion fleet. Pug's squadron had launched from Saratoga that morning with 12 aircraft. They'd been scattered across 100 square miles of sky during the intercept. Radio chatter was confusion and static. His wingmen were gone. Lost visual contact during the engagement with the bomber formation. Now Pug was alone, scanning the sky, looking for targets, looking for threats, trying to process the information flooding through his canopy. 2 miles ahead, slightly below, a single dive bomber limping toward friendly lines. Aichi D3A Val. Japanese. And above it, 8 Zeros in a protective screen, weaving back and forth, searching for American fighters. Pug's Wildcat was a stubby, thick-winged fighter that carrier pilots called the Flying Anvil. Slower than the Zero. Heavier. Less maneuverable in sustained turns. Navy brass had told him the Wildcat was obsolete before the war even started. Aviation journals said American pilots needed better equipment. Japanese propaganda called it the tin can with wings. Pug had 1,840 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. 6 guns. Enough fuel for maybe 45 minutes of combat operations. And a tactical doctrine that said never dogfight a Zero if you could avoid it. He couldn't avoid it. He pushed the stick forward and dove toward the formation. Operation Watchtower was America's first major offensive in the Pacific. After 8 months of desperate defense, Pearl Harbor, Wake Island, the Philippines, the East Indies, the United States was finally hitting back. The target, Guadalcanal and Tulagi in the Solomon Islands, where the Japanese were building an airfield that would threaten the lifeline between America and Australia. At dawn on August 7, 1942, 11,000 Marines landed on Guadalcanal. 3,000 more hit Tulagi. The landings caught the Japanese by surprise. Initial resistance was light. Marines secured the unfinished airfield, soon to be renamed Henderson Field, within hours. But the Japanese reacted quickly. At Rabaul, over 500 miles northwest, Japanese commanders scrambled every available aircraft. Bombers. Torpedo planes. Zeros. Orders. Destroy the American invasion fleet before it could establish a foothold. The first wave arrived around midday. 27 Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers escorted by 17 Zeros. They'd flown over 600 miles, formed up over Bougainville, and dove on the American fleet from high altitude. American radar picked them up 60 miles out. Combat air patrol fighters from 3 carriers, Saratoga, Enterprise, and Wasp, scrambled to intercept. The sky above the Solomons became chaos. Bombers pressing attacks. Zeros engaging American fighters. Anti-aircraft fire from the fleet. Ships maneuvering. Aircraft burning. Men dying. Pug Southerland's squadron, VF-5 from Saratoga, was vectored toward the incoming strike. They made contact at 13,000 feet. The engagement fragmented immediately. Wildcats diving on bombers. Zeros diving on Wildcats. Individual dogfights sprawling across 50 miles of tropical sky. That's where Pug found himself. Separated from his squadron. Hunting stragglers. Protecting the Marines ashore and the ships offshore. Flying a fighter that everyone said couldn't compete with Japanese Zeros in a fair fight. The Wildcat wasn't built for fair fights. Lieutenant Commander James J. Southerland was a U.S. Navy fighter pilot assigned to VF-5, Fighting Squadron 5, based aboard USS Saratoga, CV-3. He'd earned his wings in the late 1930s and had accumulated significant carrier experience by 1942, including combat operations during the early Pacific Campaign. VF-5 had been in combat since the war began. They'd flown defensive patrols after Pearl Harbor. They'd supported operations in the Central Pacific. By August 1942, they were veterans, experienced, battle-tested, and flying the same Wildcats that critics said were already obsolete. Southerland was an experienced aviator, respected by his squadron, known for calm decision-making under pressure. Navy records confirm he was awarded the Navy Cross for actions during August 7, 1942, recognizing extraordinary heroism in aerial combat over Guadalcanal and Tulagi. Historical note: specific details about Southerland's early life, family background, and pre-war career are limited in available records. This script focuses on his documented service during the Guadalcanal invasion. What is confirmed? Southerland engaged Japanese aircraft on August 7, 1942. He shot down one A-6M0 fighter and one Aichi D-3A Val dive bomber. He then fought approximately 8 or more Zeros while isolated from friendly forces. His aircraft was shot down during this engagement. He survived by parachuting into the jungle and made his way back to American lines. He understood the Wildcat's limitations. Everyone did. The aircraft was slower in level flight than the Zero. It climbed more slowly. In a sustained horizontal turn, the Zero could outturn the Wildcat every time. But the Wildcat had advantages. It was rugged. It could absorb battle damage that would destroy a Zero. It had better high-speed handling. It could dive faster and pull out of dives more aggressively. And it had 6.50 caliber machine guns that could tear apart a Zero's unarmored airframe in a single burst. American pilots developed tactics to exploit these advantages. Thatch weave. Boom and zoom attacks. Never turn with a Zero. Use altitude. Use speed. Use teamwork. Hit hard, disengage, reset, and hit again. Southerland had trained in these tactics. He'd flown them in previous engagements. He knew the doctrine. On August 7th, alone at 14,000 feet, watching a damaged Japanese dive bomber and its Zero escorts below him, he also knew doctrine required modification. You couldn't boom and zoom if you had no altitude advantage to preserve. You couldn't use the thatch weave if your wingmen were gone. You couldn't disengage and reset if disengaging meant letting enemy aircraft reach your ships and the Marines fighting ashore. Sometimes doctrine meant doing what the situation required, even if the manual said it was suicide. Pug pushed the throttle forward and dove. The Grumman F4F Wildcat was a compromise aircraft. Designed in the late 1930s when naval aviation was transitioning from biplanes to monoplanes, it carried the design philosophy of its era: rugged, stable, and survivable. Specifications: maximum speed, approximately 318 miles per hour at 19,000 feet. Cruise speed, around 155 miles per hour. Rate of climb, approximately 1,950 feet per minute. Service ceiling, 34,900 feet. Range, roughly 770 miles. Armament, 6.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. Ammunition, approximately 240 rounds per gun in F4F4 configuration. The Wildcat was heavy. Empty weight around 5,700 pounds. Loaded combat weight over 7,900 pounds. That weight made it slower to accelerate and slower to climb, but it also made it structurally strong. The Wildcat could sustain battle damage, cannon hits, structural failures, control surface loss, and still fly. Pilots brought them back to carriers with holes torn through wings, with engines trailing smoke, with landing gear that wouldn't retract. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was the opposite philosophy. Lightweight, maneuverable, optimized for air superiority. Specifications: maximum speed, approximately 331 miles per hour at 14,930 feet. Rate of climb, roughly 3,000 feet per minute. Service ceiling, 33,000 feet. Range, over 1,900 miles with drop tank. Armament, two 20mm Type 99 cannon, two 7.7mm machine guns. The Zero weighed around 5,300 pounds loaded. Lighter airframe. No armor protection for the pilot. No self-sealing fuel tanks. This made it fast, agile, and capable of sustained turns that American fighters couldn't match. It also made it fragile. A single burst from .50 caliber guns could ignite fuel tanks, sever control cables, or kill the pilot. American pilots learned to exploit that fragility. Don't dogfight. Don't turn. Use the Wildcat's better dive speed and high-speed handling. Attack from above. Make one pass. Disengage. Climb back to altitude. Repeat. It worked when you had altitude. It worked when you had wingmen. It worked when you controlled the engagement. Pug Southerland was about to find out what happened when none of those conditions applied. Pug dove through 13,000 feet, his Wildcat accelerating toward terminal velocity. The Japanese formation grew larger in his windscreen. One Val dive bomber, trailing smoke from earlier damage, struggling to maintain altitude. 8 Zeros above it in a protective screen, weaving back and forth. Airspeed indicator climbed past 280 miles per hour. The control stick stiffened as air pressure increased. Pug kept his eyes on the formation, calculating intercept angle, closure rate, firing solution. The Wildcat's engine roared. Vibration translated through the airframe into his bones. At 9,000 feet, one of the Zeros spotted him. Pug saw it break formation, rolling toward his dive trajectory. He ignored it, focused on the Val. Priority 1, kill the bomber. Priority 2, survive. He pulled the stick back at 7,500 feet, leveling off on the Val's tail. G-forces pressed him into his seat. Vision narrowed at the edges. He blinked, forced oxygen through the mask, kept his head moving. Scan the sky. Locate targets. Execute. The Val's rear gunner opened fire. Pug saw tracers. 7.7mm rounds that couldn't penetrate the Wildcat's armored windscreen at this angle. He closed to 300 yards, placed the gunsight pipper on the Val's engine, and squeezed the trigger. 6.50 caliber guns opened fire. The Wildcat shuddered. Tracers arced across the sky. The Val's engine cowling disintegrated. Pieces of metal tumbled through the air. Smoke turned to flame. The dive bomber nosed over, falling, burning. First kill. 21 seconds of combat. Pug didn't watch it fall. Already looking for the next threat. The Zeros had reacted. 2 were diving on him from his left quarter. 6 more were positioning themselves above, setting up a bracket. He pulled hard right, then reversed, forcing the diving Zeros to overshoot. They flashed past too fast, misjudging his maneuver. Pug rolled inverted, pulled toward one of them, fired a short burst. Maybe 40 rounds. The Zero's tail section sparked. Pug saw the rudder tear away. The aircraft snapped into a flat spin, falling toward the green jungle below. 1-0. First confirmed fighter kill. 53 seconds of combat. Then the situation deteriorated. The remaining 7 Zeros abandoned any pretense of returning to Rabaul and converged on Pug's position. Standard doctrine: eliminate the threat. 7 against 1. Professional pilots executing coordinated tactics. Pug checked his altitude. 6,200 feet. Not enough to run. Not enough to climb away. He had speed from the dive, maybe 285 miles per hour, but that advantage would vanish in seconds once he started maneuvering. He made a decision. Instead of trying to extend and disengage, he turned into the nearest Zero. Head-on pass. Closure rate over 600 miles per hour. Both aircraft firing. The Zero's 20mm cannon shells traced past Pug's canopy. One round hit his left wing. He felt the impact, saw the hole appear in the aluminum skin. He kept the trigger depressed. The Zero filled his gun sight. Then they flashed past each other, missing collision by maybe 15 feet. Pug reversed hard, pulling the stick into his stomach. G-forces crushed him into the seat. His vision grayed at the edges. He forced breath through the oxygen mask, tightened his abdominal muscles, fought the blackout. The Wildcat groaned, airframe protesting, but held together. Behind him, the Zero tried to follow the turn. But Pug had used the Wildcat's weight as an advantage. The heavier aircraft maintained energy better in vertical maneuvers. He pulled up, then rolled over the top, executing a high yo-yo maneuver that bled speed but repositioned him above the Zero. The Japanese pilot recognized the trap and disengaged, diving away. Smart. Disciplined. But now Pug was defensive. 6 Zeros had used the distraction to position themselves. Too high for at his altitude. They were setting up a bracket. Classic fighter tactics. Force the target to choose. Evade the high attackers and expose yourself to the mid-level attackers, or engage the mid-level attackers and let the high attackers have a free shot. Pug chose neither. He pushed the stick forward, diving again, then immediately pulled back into a steep climb. The Wildcat's engine screamed. The airframe shuddered. He was burning energy, trading speed for altitude, but he needed separation. 2 Zeros dove on him. Pug saw tracers, heard impacts. Something hit his tail section, metal tearing, control stick jerking. He jinked left, then right, then reversed into a rolling scissors maneuver. The Zeros followed, trying to match his turns, but Pug's unpredictable reversals prevented a clean shot. They spiraled downward. 4,800 feet. 4,100 feet. 3,400 feet. The jungle canopy filled Pug's peripheral vision. He was running out of altitude and options. At 2,600 feet, one of the Zero pilots made a mistake. He pulled too hard, trying to cut inside Pug's turn. The Zero's nose pitched up, bleeding speed. Just for a moment. Less than 2 seconds. Pug didn't hesitate. He reversed his turn, pulled lead, fired. The burst walked across the Zero's wing route. The fuel tank ignited. The aircraft rolled inverted, trailing fire, and fell into the jungle below. But Pug had no time to confirm. The other Zero was still there, and 5 more were converging from above. He was at 2,200 feet, out of altitude, low on speed, and now 6 Zeros were hunting him. He couldn't climb, couldn't outrun them, couldn't disengage. So he fought. For the next 12 minutes, Pug Southerland engaged in a low-altitude dogfight that defied every tactical doctrine the Navy taught. He turned when he should have run. He climbed when he should have dove. He reversed when he should have extended. He did everything wrong according to the manual. And he stayed alive. The Zeros attacked in sequence. One would dive, force Pug to defend, then extend while another attacked from a different angle. Professional tactics. They were conserving ammunition, managing fuel, working as a team. Pug exploited the only advantage he had, unpredictability. He varied his defensive maneuvers. Never used the same tactic twice. Forced the Zeros to reset their attacks. Made them overshoot. Made them guess. At one point, 4 Zeros were in his 6 o'clock position, all firing. Pug pulled into a vertical climb, engine at maximum power, airspeed bleeding away. The Wildcat climbed through 3,800 feet, slowing. The Zeros followed, expecting him to stall and fall. At 4,200 feet, Pug kicked the rudder hard left, simultaneously rolling right. The Wildcat snap-rolled, inverted, and dove back through the climbing Zeros. 2 of them tried to follow. Too slow. Too close. One had to brake hard to avoid collision. The Japanese pilot flinched, pulled away, lost his firing solution. Pug dove past 1,800 feet, pulled out at 700 feet, skimming the jungle canopy. The Zeros circled above, regrouping. His ammunition counter showed less than 400 rounds remaining. Fuel gauge showed 31 minutes. His left aileron was damaged, control stick responding sluggishly. Something was leaking. He could see fluid streaming from beneath the cowling. The Zeros dove again. Pug turned into them, head-on, both sides firing. Tracers crossed in the space between the aircraft. He felt more impacts. His windscreen cracked, a spider web of fractures spreading across the glass. Something hot touched his right leg, a fragment of something, shrapnel or debris. They flashed past. Pug reversed, climbed, dove, climbed again. His movements were instinctive now. No conscious thought. Just reaction. Target. Threat. Maneuver. Fire. One of the Zeros made a mistake. Pulled too close, trying to get inside Pug's turn radius. Pug snapped a burst, maybe 60 rounds, and saw pieces fly off the Zero's cowling. The Japanese aircraft pulled up sharply, trailing white vapor. Coolant or fuel. Not fatal, but damaged. It broke off, heading northwest, struggling to maintain altitude. 5 Zeros left. Pug's vision was narrowing. Fatigue. Oxygen deprivation. Adrenaline crash. He blinked, forced his eyes to focus. Keep moving. Keep fighting. 1 more minute. Then 1 more after that. The remaining Zeros attacked together. Coordinated. 2 high, 3 at mid-level. Pug was between them, no altitude to maneuver, no speed to extend, ammunition running low. He pulled into the high attackers, fired a sustained burst, 120 rounds, forcing them to break. The maneuver bled his speed. The mid-level Zeros capitalized immediately, closing the distance, lining up shots. Pug reversed hard, pulling maximum G, vision tunneling to gray, then black at the edges. He eased pressure on the stick, let blood flow back to his brain, scanned for threats. A Zero was tracking him, perfectly positioned, 300 yards behind, lining up the killing shot. Pug chopped throttle, extended speed brakes, dropping his airspeed by 40 knots in 2 seconds. The Zero overshot, flashing past Pug's canopy. Pug rolled, tracked the target, fired his remaining ammunition, 206 rounds, in a single desperate burst. The tracers swept across the Zero's fuselage. Pug saw impacts along the cockpit area. The canopy shattered. The Zero nosed over, inverted, and fell. But Pug's guns had stopped firing. Click. Empty. For Zeros were still there, still attacking, circling like sharks, now with a defenseless target. Pug did the only thing left. He pushed the stick forward, dove toward the jungle, and tried to run. The Zeros followed. They knew he was out of ammunition. They took their time, conserving their remaining rounds, positioning for clean shots. At 1,100 feet, 20mm cannon shells stitched across Pug's right wing. The Wildcat shuddered. He felt the aircraft yaw to the right, aileron damage worsening. He compensated with rudder, kept flying, kept dodging. At 900 feet, another burst hit his tail section. The control stick went slack. Something critical had been severed. Elevator cables, trim system, something. The Wildcat nosed down. Pug hauled back on the stick, using brute force, barely maintaining level flight. At 600 feet, a third burst hit his engine. The cowling exploded outward. Oil sprayed across the windscreen, coating the glass in black film. The engine seized, stopped, propeller windmilling uselessly. Smoke poured into the cockpit. Pug was gliding now. No power. No ammunition. Controls barely responding. The jungle rushing up to meet him. He made a decision. At 400 feet, he jettisoned the canopy. Wind roared into the cockpit. He unstrapped his harness, stood on the seat, and rolled over the side. The parachute deployed. 1 swing, 2 swings, then he hit the jungle canopy at 20 feet per second. Branches tore at him, slowed him, dropped him into the undergrowth 20 feet below. He landed hard, rolled, felt pain in his ankle. Above him, the Zeros circled once, saw the parachute tangled in the trees, and departed. They were low on fuel, far from home, and the pilot was down. Pug lay in the jungle, breathing hard, checking for injuries. His right leg was bleeding, shrapnel wound. His left ankle was sprained or broken. His flight suit was torn. But he was alive. A quarter-mile away, his Wildcat hit the jungle and exploded. The sound echoed across the valley. Pug stood up, tested his weight on his ankle, winced, and started limping east toward where he thought American lines might be. Pug Southerland spent 3 days moving through the jungle. He navigated by sun position, avoided open areas, drank from streams, ate nothing. His ankle swelled. The shrapnel wound in his leg became infected. Fever set in on the 2nd day. On the afternoon of August 10th, a Marine patrol from the 1st Marine Division found him 2 miles south of the Lunga River. He was delirious, dehydrated, barely conscious. They carried him to the beachhead, where Navy corpsmen treated his wounds and evacuated him to one of the transports offshore. Intelligence officers debriefed him aboard ship. He gave his account. 1 Val dive bomber shot down, 1 Zero shot down, sustained engagement with approximately 8 Zeros, aircraft destroyed, forced to bail out, 3 days in the jungle. The intelligence officers documented everything. Squadron records confirmed Pug's 2 kills. 1 D3A Val and 1 A6M0 on August 7, 1942. Fighter direction officers corroborated the prolonged engagement. They'd tracked multiple aircraft in a localized combat area for over 12 minutes, an unusually long dogfight at low altitude. When they asked Pug how he'd survived, he said he didn't know. Just kept flying, kept maneuvering, kept making the Zeros work for it. The Navy awarded him the Navy Cross. The citation recognized his actions on August 7, 1942. 2 confirmed kills, sustained combat while isolated from friendly forces, and extraordinary heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. Pug recovered from his injuries and returned to flight status. He continued flying combat missions throughout the Pacific Campaign. Survived the war. Returned home. Like most veterans, he rarely spoke about what happened that day above Guadalcanal. The invasion of Guadalcanal is remembered as the beginning of America's island-hopping campaign. 6 months of brutal fighting on the island. Naval battles offshore. Air combat overhead. Over 7,000 American casualties. The first step in a long road to Tokyo. But battles aren't won by strategy alone. They're won by individual pilots making decisions in fractions of seconds, fighting aircraft that everyone said were obsolete, surviving encounters that doctrine said were impossible. Pug Southerland flew a Wildcat that was slower, heavier, and less maneuverable than the aircraft trying to kill him. Aviation experts said the Wildcat couldn't compete. Japanese pilots called it the tin can. American strategists wanted it replaced. Pug flew it anyway. Shot down one Valdive bomber and one Zero fighter. Fought 8 or more Zeros alone for over 12 minutes. Survived an engagement that should have killed him in the first 90 seconds. When his aircraft was finally shot down, he parachuted into hostile jungle, evaded enemy forces for 3 days, and made it back to friendly lines. The Wildcat wasn't obsolete. It was a weapon system operated by people who understood its strengths, accepted its limitations, and refused to die just because someone said the odds were against them. Modern fighter doctrine still teaches the principles Pug demonstrated. Energy management, vertical maneuvering, unpredictability, using your aircraft's advantages to offset the enemy's strengths. Fighting smart when you can't fight fair. The Wildcat's combat record speaks for itself. Between 1940 and 1943, Wildcats were credited with over 1,327 enemy aircraft destroyed. During the Guadalcanal campaign, Wildcat pilots flew thousands of sorties, protecting the Marines ashore, defending the fleet, and establishing air superiority over Henderson Field. Pug Southerland's aircraft, bureau number uncertain in available records, was destroyed in the jungle on August 7, 1942. The wreckage was never recovered. Pug survived the war, served his country, and lived quietly afterward. He died decades later, outliving the Wildcat, outliving the Zero, outliving the men who tried to kill him that day above the Solomons. There's a lesson in that. Not about heroism. Not about glory. About the reality that survival in combat doesn't come from having the best equipment. It comes from using the equipment you have better than your enemy uses theirs. Doctrine matters. Training matters. Equipment matters. But in the moment when you're alone at 6,000 feet with 8 Zeros converging on your position, and your wingmen are gone, and your ammunition is running low, and every tactical manual says you should disengage. In that moment, survival comes from one thing. The refusal to accept that you're already dead. Pug Southerland refused. He fought. He survived. When his aircraft finally went down, he walked out of the jungle and continued fighting. That's how victory happens. Not through perfect equipment. Not through overwhelming numbers. Through pilots who understand their aircraft deeply enough that doctrine becomes instinct, who trust their training but adapt when training isn't enough, who keep fighting when the manual says fighting is suicide. The Wildcat was a tin can. Until it wasn't. Until pilots like Pug Southerland proved that the best weapon in any war isn't the aircraft. It's the human being flying it.